Baker, would you like Craig to pull in Miss Grant? And then I've got 3 colleagues who also need to be pulled in.
I think we could go ahead and pull everybody in.
Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
Dr. Baker.
All right.
Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any public other than GRPS employees, so.
Okay.
Ooh. And you guys can hear me okay?
Yeah, we can, you're good.
All right, awesome.
So Dr. Baker, my team is all here. I see Miss Grant as well.
Okay. Let me pull up the agenda here.
Thanks, guys. This is Christian. I'm here.
All is good.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm not seeing my agenda, but anyway, welcome to the October Academic Achievement Committee meeting. I am so sorry that I've just lost my agenda. If somebody has the agenda.
Yeah, so we, of course, public comment first, Dr. Baker.
Yeah, I don't, no one signed up for public comment and I don't see any public, am I wrong? Anybody out there?
No, my understanding is there is no public comment for this meeting.
Okay. So next, Dr. Baker, we will have the Instructional Counsel report. You want to take attendance, Dr. Baker, first, and then go into?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
I'll call the roll. So Reverend Matthias.
Yep, I'm here.
President Grant.
Present.
Ms. Davis.
I'm here.
And Tony Baker is here. Okay, and then who is doing the Instructional Counsel?
Yep. So we have Amy Powney. She is going to give the Instructional Counsel report. She's up first. So
Okay.
Amy's on the line.
All right. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, Dr. Baker, President Grant, Reverend Matthias, Ms. Davis. I'm going to give you an update on our latest Instructional Council meeting. So we held a meeting on September 24th, and Dr. Gunno led the meeting and welcomed everyone, and introductions were made. We went over and reviewed the purpose and policy of the Instructional Council. And as the district this year is chairing the council, Dr. Mulunge Kalambula and myself were appointed co-chairs for this year. We also discussed and voted on holding meetings on the 3rd Wednesday of each month in the future from 1 to 3, with the exception of October because of some conflicts with upcoming conferences. And while we are in distance learning with the hybrid model, excuse me, we are going to continue that schedule and we'll revisit it. Teachers felt that that was the least amount of disruption to instruction, since that is in the hybrid model a day for distance learning at home. We then continued with reviewing some old business. As you know from our update in the spring, we did not have any meetings in March or April due to the COVID shutdown, but we did meet in May and had a report out to you, to the Academic Achievement Committee in the spring. Some things that we reviewed was that there had been a flow chart that had been submitted for the process for submitting courses, and the due dates for that was submitted, and we need to next have that approved by Mr. Rodney Lewis, Executive Director of Secondary Schools. And then we've decided that we need to revisit and invite some of our colleagues to come back to council and give us updates on different courses that were proposed through the fall and winter. We were kind of in the middle of revisiting the status of those when the shutdown occurred. So courses like the Spanish for Spanish speakers at Union, pilot courses in AP Spanish at Southwest Middle High, the Academy of Hospitality and Tourism courses and museum school were among things that, and some of our shared time courses that were proposed. We are going to be inviting them back to give us updates on where they stand on that. We know that with the shutdown, things got interrupted, and we would like to get updates on that. At our meeting also, Mrs. Tony Moore, Director of Special Education, she shared that the Making a Difference curriculum will need to be revisited. There was a new contact is going to be put in place. The person through the ISD has since left that position, and she was not entirely sure of next steps at this time. We haven't begun instruction with that curriculum yet due to the finalization of grants and the COVID interruption. So we are going to be revisiting that and finding out where that's going to be, what the status of that's going to be going forward. The only new business that was really brought up besides that update from Tony Moore was proposing a process for communication with staff and principals to increase awareness of the purpose of the work and make more transparent the process for bringing forth courses and access to documentation. So we're going to be working on that, a communication plan, so that we can just be more transparent and break down any barriers that might be in the way, or confusion that might be in the way of schools not knowing how they go about the process. So giving that update and having a more concrete process of how we communicate with schools about that. And then we listed the next meeting agenda topics that I've mentioned to take place, and the meeting was adjourned.
Does the committee have any comments or questions?
This is Christian. I don't.
Okay. I'd like to, so is there any sense, especially if or when we continue with instruction the way it's been changed this year, that the Instructional Council will address issues that come up with our transitions to various learning styles? Or will it continue to be what it has been and kind of reviewing new courses? That's for anybody to answer. It seems like it's it's an opportunity where outside of building principals and teachers or the union and administration, that it's a place that people are just talking about how to teach and how students learn.
Amy, do you have some thoughts on that?
I certainly think that that would definitely be an opportunity for us to have some of those discussions, especially ways in which we could share with the district, across the district, with staff, and get their input on things, and have some set ideas and strategies for people to use. I definitely think that's certainly an opportunity. I mean, this is completely uncharted territory, right? So I think we're open to anything, absolutely.
And I don't want to, we have talked about how we don't want to, this committee doesn't want to change the work of the Instructional Council, but we are discussing, especially with the new students, how the Instructional Council informs the board through this. And so I think that this committee and the board would appreciate any insight that's gained from these discussions, and to just bring those discussions to us. So I mean, we're all going to have ideas about how to move forward, and the board does hear from people, but usually just an occasional person who has a problem, but not on how things go. Anyway, encourage that. And if we get something that looks like normality, or at least adjust to this new normal, we will have a discussion with the superintendent about how the Instructional Council informs the board.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dr. Baker. In a similar fashion, I guess I'm sort of thinking with the Instructional Council as a kind of a infrastructure. So as she was alluding to, this is new territory, and really needing to think about how we undergird learning styles, the preparation of materials, and electronic as well. And so I'm just wondering how a plan might develop to undergird the kinds of supports that both teachers that are able to teach under these conditions, IT and so forth, but then also hard copies that what we're doing, and then meeting the different learning styles of our students, IEPs and so forth. So.
Yeah, my thoughts, I think that the instructional council is an agreed upon system between the union and the administration. I'm suggesting that this committee would love if you guys had further conversations and to go into some of the ideas that John was just mentioning and share them back with this committee.
Absolutely. We'll take note of that and bring that back to the council that you've requested that. And like I said, I certainly think, not knowing exactly how many courses are really going to be proposed in a year like this, it may be a great opportunity to have those kind of conversations. So.
Yeah, and even just, and this could be just anecdotally, but just so we all have more information, is, some of those, a lot of courses, some work better online than or worse online than they were designed, and we may want to take that into account.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Next, we have the Center for Applied Linguistics presentation.
Good afternoon.
Yes, Dr. Baker. So we have Dr. Amida Gunno. She will be presenting this evening on Center for Applied Linguistics. Of course, just to give a tiny bit of background information, this was really an audit of our bilingual programs that Dr. Gunno will be getting into pretty deeply this evening. So with no further ado, Dr. Amida Gunno.
Good afternoon, President Grant and board members. I'm here today to present to you the evaluation of the bilingual programs, Grand Rapids Public Schools. As you may recall, this evaluation happened last school year before we shut down for COVID. We had gone before the board, the finance committee, and academic achievement. You were aware that we had asked to have this assessment, audit done, evaluation of the bilingual programs, which include 4 of the schools. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned to you that in your packet, you should have received the PowerPoint that I'll be addressing this evening or this afternoon, the 50-page report, which is quite detailed and extensive. And then you also have key terms and definitions, because in the report, there are many definitions that we don't use on a daily basis, and we just don't use them, and it's good for us to review. And then the last thing you should have gotten is their proposal for further technical support and professional development. So without further ado, I'm gonna start with the PowerPoint, if that's okay with everybody.
Yes, please.
So the assessment, the evaluation was conducted in the winter, this past winter, and it was, we contracted with the Center for Applied Linguistics to provide the assessment for the 4 bilingual programs. We have 3 schools that are transitional bilingual education programs, and I'll go into those schools in a minute. And then we have 1 that is dual language immersion, which is Southwest Community Campus. Next slide, please. So in the report, they first of all start by saying that they start mentioning some of the things that we're doing to move in the right direction. And I'll review those. One of them is that the 4 schools are now under one district leadership. And those 4 schools are Burton Elementary, Cesar Chavez Buchanan, and Southwest Community Campus. The other thing they pointed out was that the district was investing in a curriculum that had a Spanish language component, a literacy curriculum. Next slide, please. Another positive, moving in the right direction, was that we, the district, decided to construct. We were under construction. We were constructing a new high school, which is now complete. And that high school was going to be able to continue the pathway of biliteracy from pre-K to 12. And not only continue the pathway, but that would give students an opportunity to get the state seal of biliteracy, which is a plus to get on your diploma. The next positive was that we were looking at, as a district, at the possibility of having one of those transitional bilingual education schools be going into the pipeline for the dual language immersion at Southwest. So in essence, we would be giving more opportunities for students to become bilingual, biliterate, bicultural. Next slide, please. The two questions that were the evaluation questions are posed here, and I'll read them to you. What is the state of current policies and practices at the 4 bilingual schools as assessed from the perspective of research-based effective practices that lead to bilingual and biliterate students, high academic achievement in 2 languages, and social cultural competence? And the second evaluation question, what is the feasibility of TBE, that means transitional bilingual education programs, transitioning from 1-way or 2-way dual language immersion programs? What steps would need to be taken to accomplish this, and how might the 2-way program be enhanced? So those were the 2 major questions that they were looking to answer when they came to our schools. Next slide, please. Again, within this presentation, you have that slide that has the key acronyms, although you have the other page that has even more acronyms. So that's just for your information. Next slide, please. So CAL, the Center for Applied Linguistics, uses the 7 components of successful dual language immersion as their foundation for their assessment. And they use the book, the Guiding Principles for Dual Language Education. It's a 3rd edition, which all of our leaders in those schools have. We bought that edition for them before this evaluation began. And CAL is looking for these 7 components in programming. Next slide, please. So we go on to the methodology. CAL was here for more than 2.5 days, almost 3 days. They did site visits. They came from February 17th to the 21st. They went to the 4 schools. They conducted individual and group interviews. They interviewed both principals and staff. They had classroom observations. They also had 2 evenings for parent focus groups. One was on, one parent focus group was at Southwest and the other one was at Buchanan, and parents from the other schools could attend those. They also held district level administrator interviews. Next slide, please. As in all reports, we're going to see things that are working well and things that we need to work on and improve on. And the following are a list of improvements to work on that they found, that they're recommending that we look at. So the first one is looking at having pre-K services in Spanish for TBE and DLI schools which means, goes to the second point, that we as a district would recruit and retain pre-K bilingual Spanish staff. The third point is that we would have clear description of the transition from Spanish to English instruction, and then that we monitor it. So there's consistency at the 3 transitional bilingual education schools, so that everybody's using the same program model, the same percentages of Spanish and English, and that everyone is transitioning at the same grade levels. I'm going to continue on the next page.
Maida, can you just explain what that meant? If you're not going to, just explain the transition that you were talking about from Spanish.
Transition, okay. So at the transitional bilingual education programs, which are the 3, not all students that whose parents want them to be in the program, begin in pre-K and kindergarten in Spanish literacy with an ESL component. The goal of transitional bilingual education is what we call an early exit, because you're using your skills in Spanish. The students they come from homes where Spanish is the language of the home. So they come to us with only Spanish. So they begin their literacy, their schooling in Spanish, and then we add more English as time goes on. So by 3rd grade in those 3 schools, we call it an early exit, they transition only to English. And Buchanan, Burton, and Cesar Chavez. So because you only learn to read once, so you're transferring skills from reading in Spanish to English. ESL, English as a second language, is always a component in that program. And the reason that those schools have that is because traditionally those schools have been predominantly Spanish-speaking homes. Now there is a pathway at those schools. If I as a parent do not want my child to be in that transitional bilingual education program, I can choose to have them in an ESL only, which means they would not be instructed in Spanish. They would only use ESL methodology and strategies for instruction. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then just finally, with the 3 schools, the 3 new schools, do they continue on with bilingual into 1st grade and up, or do they exit out?
The 3 schools, the transitional bilingual education schools, transition out kids from Spanish to all English by 3rd grade.
The 3rd grade, okay.
Right, so they don't continue Spanish up to 5th grade. The schools are up to 5th grade.
Okay, so they stop. So these students would not necessarily be prepared to move to Southwest for 6th grade.
Correct, because they may not pass the test.
Okay, so they'll still have to pass the test. Okay.
So what the report is saying that, and we had conversation as a district at looking at the possibility of 1 or more of those 3 schools becoming dual language immersion, where you would not stop the teaching of Spanish, you would continue and be a 50-50 program. But then the dilemma, and maybe I'm getting too much into the weeds here, so stop me and tell me to move on.
No, this is important because it was my impression that we were just creating a full pathway at all 3 of those schools.
And we could, the issue becomes, do we have enough room at Southwest Community Campus to have to create that pathway? Or do you need another site? And now I know that's not the purpose of this.
Okay, all right. Okay, I'll stop. This is just an aside. I'm
No,
sorry. I do
because-
understand now what you're discussing. So,
Okay.
okay.
Correct. So our current modus apparatum, how we're operating right now, is that we're using the transitional model at these 3 schools that you mentioned, Dr. Gunno, in order to transition kids from Spanish only to English by 3rd grade, because that's the way our system operates at this point. And so then to do something different means that we have to refit certain aspects of our process, kindergarten, elementary, middle, and so forth, if we were going to do either bilingual or something else, correct?
Well, it's a staffing, it would need
Right.
staffing, more Spanish, English staffing, and then you would have to have more room at Southwest Community Campus for the path to have those 3 schools, all those students go up to, if they chose to, go up to Southwest Community Campus.
Okay. Let's go on. Let's
This is Christian. Oh, go ahead. I have a different question. I just want to make sure I'm not missed. So once you guys are done, I have a question.
no, go ahead, Christian. We can move on after this.
So my question is just about like when they came and were able to observe, things were so much different for everyone in all schools, but especially for those students in the schools that we're talking about. So do we foresee all of the data, all their observations still all being accurate and relevant, or have we even thought about what things have changed and will continue to be different moving forward based off that, or is that not relevant at all?
Well, this is a report on what they found then, because this
Right,
was
I understand. I'm just, as we think about implementing changes based on what they found, do we think that all of it is still the same and relevant, or do we think that COVID will have changed some things, either because they talk to parents and students? Do we think any of that has changed?
May I try to answer some of that? I don't know.
Yes,
that,
please.
I don't think the basic premise has changed. I think if we want to have students that are totally bilingual, bicultural, biliterate, we need to look at program models that are consistent between schools if we want to create a pathway. Now, whether that program model is face-to-face, hybrid, or virtual, we still have to have the staff to do that. And the consistency of the model matters. So if I choose to exit students at 3rd grade, which maybe you don't want to anymore, then the 3 schools have to be consistent in models so that when kids move between schools, they are on the same pathway. Does that make sense?
Thank you. And I think that's, in my eyes, that's true pre-COVID, post-COVID. So I thank you for that clarification. I agree. And furthermore, I think you did answer my question in saying that no matter what model they're learning on, whether that's in person or virtual, we need some consistency.
Thank you.
Yep.
So may I continue?
yeah, please do. Sorry for interruptions.
No, that's okay. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but the next slide talks about having instruction that is research validated. These are part of their recommendations or improvements. As we continue to look at their recommendations, there's a big piece of recommendations for PD, for teachers to continue to build understanding of how students develop their language, how I become biliterate, bicultural, and biliterate. And yes, biliterate, bicultural, bilingual, the three. So it's looking back at making sure that we look at research, we follow best research practice, and we have professional development, but that we also implement. Next slide, please. Again, here, I touched a little bit about this, aligning PD to support efforts for both dual language immersion and of course, transitional bilingual. Looking at reconfiguring the current model so that you have both English language arts and Spanish language arts. You have to have both. Provided, otherwise, we don't get a pathway to biliteracy. And again, having that PD that addresses both languages and how I, as a teacher or a staff person, coordinates instruction across the two languages. Next slide, please. One of their final considerations is to make sure that we uphold linguistic equity between English and Spanish, and that we support, if we truly are going to say we believe in this, then we have to support and give all the resources and opportunities to have bilingualism and biliteracy, and supporting the goals with a biliteracy curriculum. Next slide, please. I think we're getting towards the end. There's a recommendation for the secondary piece for dual language instruction. And keep in mind that they've just started this. So they are in the process of designing Spanish language arts courses to meet the needs of their students. And another recommendation, which they are doing, is to get resources and professional development that will help support the program. And then I think I have another slide here, please. Tells us the recommendations that Cal is seeing as to what really would be points for professional development. And it talks about integration of language, promotion of being able to comprehend both content in English and in Spanish, always making sure that we have higher order thinking skills, that our instruction is rigorous in both languages. We need not forget that oral language development in both English and Spanish are very crucial. You can't have one without the other. And that you have to provide that interdependency between language 1 and language 2. And also, we can't forget about our ESL learners that are in those schools. That ESL sheltering strategies or sheltered strategies in both languages are important. Next slide, please. And this is the final slide. The final slide, I want to say that I really like the fact that they're recommending strategic planning and getting input, having input from teachers, principals, and other stakeholders. And by the way, the only people that have seen this report are you and the internal people, Dr. Roby, Dr. Gorman, the academic staff, but principals have gotten this, but the staff have not, because the board had not seen it. So the next step would be to have staff look at it and do some planning around how to support them and what their needs are. So that is the final slide. Any questions?
I'll just say thanks. I think that last year was the first year that those 3 schools were online as a bilingual school. Is that correct?
Well, those schools, the 3 schools have traditionally always been there's 2 pathways there at those 3 schools. You can either have transitional bilingual or ESL or gen ed. 3 pathways, but so those schools have been like that for, I would say, 20 years.
Okay, all right.
Well, I think what Dr. Gunno was referencing is Dr. Gunno is the executive director over all of those programs. And there were times when
yes.
there were different executive directors over those programs. Now they're all together kind of under one roof,
Oh, I see.
under one executive director.
I guess, for me, a few clarifications. One is it would be interesting based on what they reviewed, and then the 3 pathways that have been there, as you said, for 20 years. What is the breakdown of students that went through that? In other words, parents that chose the transitional model, the bilingual model, and so forth. And then I suspect that we should have been, or should be able to track that and see where those students ended up, whether they were bilingual, whether they transitioned, and so forth, especially if it sounds like the recommendations are that this district look at becoming more of a bilingual, bicultural system, K through high school. And then obviously you guys are going to talk about what that's going to look like in terms of teacher preparation, curriculum, and so forth. But I'm just wondering if we're going to be able to have the data that says, yeah, here's what we've been doing. Here's the number of students that went through these things. This is where they ended up, or did it not, or what, just so that we really start looking at how we retool or those kinds of things. And certainly at a modern age, as President Grant was alluding, that with our current world as it is, we're looking at a lot of online and those kinds of things, and so supporting that possibility too.
We can get that we could look at into that information, Dr. Gorman, correct? I believe we could get that.
Absolutely, Dr. Gunno. I think that's super important, to find out, how much learning took place, where are those students now, to which programs did they matriculate? I think that's all information that we can get most of that information to which you alluded.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's my sense that if we create true biliteracy, then it should translate to lots of areas of academics. And yeah, it would be good to know that, and then to invest further in it if needed. So, sounds like that's what the report is asking for. So, thanks. This is very good. Thanks for preparing. Working with that group and then bringing it to us.
The report is very extensive. If you get a chance to read those 50 pages, they did a nice job. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Gunno.
Thank you for letting me present today. Have a good evening.
You too.
It's kind of exciting.
So the next discussion, I just want to tee it up a little bit before we move on. I want to give some credit to our past discussions. We had planned to, in both this meeting and also in the conference, the committee conference chairs talked about how we could move to analyzing other kinds of academic work, such as the academies, teacher evaluations, things that in other words, getting back to the work of this committee. I also, when I met with Dr. Gorman and Dr. Roby last week, just was concerned with the information that was coming to us from folks. And so what we decided was, especially in this continual time of transition, that it would be nice to just get an analysis of what has been happening, analysis of learning that's been taking place, which is why we're doing this rather than other concerns. So I wanted to know where we were at with this first marking period, and what the future might look like by understanding that. So appreciate Dr. Gorman for pulling this analysis together. And if you want to go ahead and start that.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Dr. Baker. And this is especially important now as we are transitioning into another phase of distance learning. One of the key questions that was asked in preparation for this meeting today was, what does participation look like in our district as it relates to distance learning? And so what we've done, and Jonathan will be sharing this, Jonathan Harper will be sharing this in just a second. But what we've done is we've broken down really what the last 4 weeks have looked like from a participation perspective. We're going to be sharing numbers with you of students who have been logging in and interacting synchronously with their teachers every single day. We're also going to be sharing some information with you of students who have not been logging in during the normal times, but have been finding other opportunities to make connections with their teachers, either asynchronously or in another way. We are planning as we move forward to dig even deeper into this and not only show you from a district level perspective what participation looks like, but we also want to show you what all of the schools look like from a participation perspective. What we did today, just to give you a little taste of what's next, is we picked a handful of schools. So we picked a test-in school, we picked a theme school, we picked some neighborhood schools. We looked at different quadrants of the city, and we want to show you what their participation rates are. And what you'll see is there are pretty good participation rates as it relates to the 15,000 or so students who are enrolled and how many of those students have been logging on. I'm happy to say that those numbers have continued to increase as we've been in session, and really hats off to our teachers and our building-based leaders for just focusing on getting kids in class and getting them engaged in learning. And coincidentally, this is count day, so this is really the most important day of the year for counting students. Of course, we have 2 count days. This is the 90% day, and then we have a 10% day, of course, in the winter. But Jonathan Harper, will you take it away and show the data that we've come up with? So Jonathan Harper, Director of Curriculum.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here to present. Thank you, Dr. Gorman. So as Dr. Gorman mentioned, we're here to present an analysis of learning really from a participation perspective over the last 4 to 5 weeks. Let me see here. So this is a view from week to week of our district-wide participation. So you can see the first column shows you, week 1, which is August 31st through September 3rd, all the way up to last week, which would be September 28th through October 2nd. And so the second column is the number of students participating each week. Third column is number of students enrolled. So the comparison then is the participation versus number of students enrolled. You can see there in the last column. And as Dr. Gorman mentioned, from a district perspective or a district-wide perspective, this has consistently increased from week to week, which is encouraging. In fact, we're hopeful that as we move forward into both a hybrid model and a virtual instruction model, that will encourage even more participation from students. As a caveat, I want to note that these numbers do exclude shared time. So this is students enrolled in our buildings currently. With these numbers, there's a couple of qualifiers. So what these numbers actually represent. And so this is based on current pupil accounting guidelines from the Michigan Department of Education in relation to extended learning plans under COVID. So A references students in kindergarten through 5th grade or through 8th grade, as well as our 6th grade only buildings. So that would be Economic Ecology, Zoo, and Blandford. So, and in those buildings, students who attended 2 or more synchronous virtual learning sessions per week, and had attendance recorded in Synergy for their scheduled homeroom course. So that is, they've been enrolled, they're participating at a minimum of 2 times per week synchronously or live with their teacher, and their teacher is recording their attendance within the Synergy in Synergy platform. Another qualifier would be students in K-5 and or K-8 buildings who attended at least 1 synchronous virtual learning session, but also completed at least 2 activities or on 2 separate dates, activities through their elementary learning platform, which is Seesaw. So that's an example of where you might have a student that's doing a combination of synchronous and asynchronous participation, but they are certainly participating in the learning. The third caveat there, letter C, represents our students in middle and high schools and alternative buildings who attend 2 or more synchronous virtual learning sessions and then had attendance recorded in Synergy for at least one of their scheduled courses. So these are the caveats per the Michigan Department of Ed for our pupil accounting to actually record attendance for students each week. And so that's what those numbers reflect. And just as a comparison, what they don't reflect. And so as I mentioned, shared time students are excluded from this count as we look at it now. Also, students that don't attend any synchronous virtual learning, and therefore they haven't been recorded in Synergy as being present, but who are completing asynchronous activities. And so this is an interesting number that we continue to dig deeper into. And as Dr. Gorman mentioned, for count day purposes, we are looking at data because the students that are evidencing participation in asynchronous activities are also still participating. We just don't have them taken as attendance in Synergy because they haven't been live with their teacher. Okay. Students who attend at least 1 synchronous virtual learning session and complete asynchronous activities through Google Classroom. This is another thing that we are digging more deeply into the data is through Google Classroom. The reporting features, particularly at secondary, those classrooms that are using Google Classroom, we're working with the Google suite of tools to pull that data so that we can actually qualify those numbers of students that are participating asynchronously as well. And then of course the last one is really students who haven't been participating, right? So that they're obviously not included in these counts. So
we should assume all non-students, all non-participants reflect D.
Yeah, so who do not complete asynchronous activities, let's see here. So virtual learning and therefore have no attendance record in Synergy, so they haven't been recorded in Synergy, and who do not complete asynchronous activities. So they don't have basically any contact, right, with the student log. So so I'm going to back up a second. So as a qualifier, these participant numbers, when we start to actually add in the students that are participating regularly on an asynchronous basis, right? These numbers will actually uptick from an accounting perspective as well. But these are encouraging numbers. So as Dr. Gorman mentioned, some school-specific examples still with the same qualifiers. As far as what these numbers actually represent. Here's an example from Palmer. Notice the week-to-week increase up to 96, almost 97% as of last week, Friday. Dickinson is another example, Southeast Side School. And again, consistently increasing numbers in participation. Next one is, as Dr. Gorman mentioned, one of our theme schools, C.A. Frost Elementary. And so you see here consistently high participation from C.A. Frost. Our neighborhood comprehensive Union High School, and very encouraging numbers, consistent increases from week to week, especially in weeks 4 and 5, upwards of 93% participation. And the last example is our Tustin High School, City High School. Last 2 weeks, we've had 100% participation there. And so I had mentioned, as I mentioned earlier, these really are encouraging, especially as we transition to both the virtual and the hybrid option model, because we think that the participation rates on these students are just going to continue to increase.
Just one additional piece of information. Of course, Jonathan referenced shared time a few times. Of course, the shared time program is the program where GRPS teachers are essentially teaching elective courses in private schools. So each year we probably gain about 600 to 1,000 students from the shared time program. So we get a fraction of each class that is taught. So if for one student, we probably get about 0.2, because only one class throughout the day will be taught for that particular student. And the FTE that we gain is approximately 600 to 1,000. Of course, we'll probably know better today, but in the weeks to come, we'll know even better than we do today.
So just want to, so B and C, I'm just thinking of the people who are not participating as reflected in that data. So students who fall under B or C, meaning that they're not doing enough synchronous, but they're doing some asynchronous, or they're, I don't want to do it. So anyway, those students are in the system, teachers are connecting with them, and we know something about them. Would that be fair to say?
There are students who are not participating during the 9 o'clock until 12 o'clock virtual learning period per day. And as you can see from the data that Jonathan shared, it is not a large group. Now, it's large enough that we absolutely need to be concerned about this group. So it could really be the gap between that 13,218 to that 15,029. So these are the students right here, of course, who are participating during that synchronous time, who've met those minimum thresholds. Again, there are students who are logging on in the evening for whom we are not taking traditional attendance, that for whom we can take attendance. We just have to follow some additional steps. We have to look at those two-way interactions where teachers are maybe working with students after hours, which doesn't count for the normal attendance, but we are allowed to mark them. We're just not capturing it here. And then, of course, students who are logging on outside of the normal time working on assignments, we will get credit for those students. Those students will, but we'll just have to take attendance a little differently. Really, our main concern right now is, and it has been since the beginning of the school year, who isn't participating during synchronous time, who isn't connecting with his or her teacher, and who isn't doing the assignments. That's the group right there that we need to continue to focus on. Did this particular group of students enroll in another school district during this particular time? Why haven't we been able to get a hold of them? I mean, the principals and the administrative assistants, youth advocates, we've really had a full court press to find all of our students. And as you can see, the enrollment numbers are pretty good. And if you add in the shared time numbers, well, that could be close to 16,000. So we're right where we need to be. Our main concern is the students who just aren't connecting. And again, it's not a large group, but it's a large enough group that we need to focus and make sure that students are receiving the education that they deserve.
So just, I guess, to clarify things, so of this approximately a little less than 2,000 that are theoretically not participating. Some of them are participating, just not meeting the attendance criteria,
Correct.
participation criteria.
Correct.
And some of them are interacting with teachers enough. So obviously there's something going on in these kids' lives that keep them from participating enough. And you're working on that.
And as Jonathan alluded to, when we come back to the hybrid model, right? So, you know, if and when we come back to the hybrid model in a couple of weeks, will we start to connect with students with whom we did not connect during the virtual learning period? You know, I'm hopeful that some students who, you know, plan on coming back to school, I'm hopeful that these will be the students with whom we had challenges interacting. And maybe there was some virtual challenges that were difficult to navigate. You know, I think of the newcomers program that Dr. Gunno is connected with. As I heard from a principal in that particular building, you know, you can give a student a computer, but if a student can't identify the letters on the keys, well, that's an even greater challenge that you'll have. And so we're hopeful that when students return in person, we'll be able to fill in some of these gaps. But of course, we won't know for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
That's kind of what I was going to ask is if we're tracking any correlation between who hasn't been participating and who's signed up for in-person. And then moving forward with that, as a teacher, I'm just a little concerned if if most of those kiddos are just starting work for the year. That's a lot of differentiation in the classroom.
You are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. Right now, I think it's too early to tell who those students are. And as you're aware, Ms. Davis, we are allowing families to reconsider their option. So we sent a communication out. If you signed up for the hybrid and you're like, no, I want to be 100% virtual. Of course, we have some deadlines, but when that settles down here in a couple of weeks, we will be able to let folks know, you know, hey, we had 200 students who weren't participating at all during virtual learning, but now that we've gotten into the hybrid model, these students are attending school every single day that they can. So we'll be able to present those data to you as well.
Yeah, and I would think it would be advantageous just to keep track of whatever data we can in regards to all this. I mean, God forbid something like this happens again in the future, we'd be better prepared. So.
Yeah, I wanted to comment as well as Ms. Davis was alluding to, and that is, you know, with the numbers that we've given our parents in regards to having technical difficulties, lack of computers, having issues even with their kids. I know in talking to some parents, their kids don't even want to log on, and so they're fighting just to have their kid log on at the appropriate time, you know, because they're feeling the pressure of being responsible and logging on when you're supposed to. But I'm wondering if we're giving parents an opportunity to sound off and say, man, I'm really struggling with my kid, and whether we have, whether it's a principal or the teacher or a counselor or our partners, the reaching out and saying, hey, what's going on and stuff. But do you have data that would say, hey, we've got 500 calls in relation to technical difficulties, in relation to lack of engagement, you know, those kinds of things that would really help us as a committee, you know, help you figure out or give messages that help parents to better engage or those kinds of things, or help their kids better engage even.
Sure. Well, we have all of those comments logged. We have the comments logged that are specifically technical. For example, I don't have a hotspot. How do I get a hotspot? We have those types of things. my iPad is not working, my Chromebook is not working. We have all of those things. But we also are hearing concerns as it relates to other items as well. Like I have, there are too many kids in this particular space. So therefore, just handing me a bunch of computers is not going to do anything. We have limited space, and therefore we can't all log on between 9 o'clock and 12 o'clock. This needs to be staggered. So unfortunately, the one way that we're showing attendance right now is the way is essentially the easiest, but we're gonna have to try to find ways, and we will find ways to capture those students who are not able to log on between 9 and 12. Dr. Roby also ensured that all the principals had listening sessions for their specific schools. So in addition to the listening sessions that took place district-wide, where Dr. Roby and I helped facilitate those, they also happened at the school level. And as you probably are aware, Reverend Matthias, there were some folks who were saying things like, gosh, this is really working out well for me, this hybrid model. There were others where, well, it's just not enough time for my student. There's learning losses taking place, etc. One silver lining, I've been able to see some, probably some one-on-one interactions that I'm not sure took place face-to-face, where students and teachers are carving out time in the afternoon to have a 15-20 minute Zoom call individually with their teacher to really get into some difficult mathematics concepts on which they're struggling, or maybe there's a social emotional issue with which the student is struggling. So I've seen there are some silver linings in this that hopefully will help us if we ever get back to normalcy. And hats off to the teachers, because this was all new and they've really made the best out of it. But there's some things that we're doing virtually now for which we didn't have the skill sets when we were in regular learning. Sorry that wasn't so eloquent.
No, that's great. I think, yeah, and if normal ever returns,
I hope so.
Continue those tools. Yeah,
It's going to return.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate this conversation. I don't see any of this data as questioning whether or not you guys are. It's just the sense that I hear also that from parents who are like, hey, this is working really well for my family. Let's just keep it up. And why are you bothering with other systems? But it's clear that it's not working. I mean, even just looking at which schools are closer to 100% versus those that aren't, it doesn't work well for everyone, this current arrangement. And so it's important. That's why I wanted to see this data, is to see how many it wasn't working well for, at least from a participation standpoint.
And we're trying to be as transparent as possible, right? And we selected those particular schools for a reason. We wanted to show you what the test in school looks like, what the theme school looks like. Let's look at some neighborhood schools. And so we really want you to have a microcosm of what this larger list could look like. But if we're truly about equity, we've got to find ways where we don't have participation in some schools and give those students students and families the resources they need to help them become successful.
Exactly. So,
and Dr. Baker, would it be appropriate for this committee to receive, I don't know if it's update or information, just on some of the social emotional pieces or struggles that seem to be emerging as themes, and ways that our other support systems, like our guidance counselors or social workers, are doing per se?
I don't think that we need the data or reports, but I think that anecdotally, it would be nice to just kind of see how people are responding. Because again, this is the kind of stuff, we're getting, if we're in the community, a variety of concerns. And even also what families are dealing with on top of the students. So I think any of that, it helps. But again, I think that this gets to what you just said, Ron, is that we have to provide equity in learning. And how do we do that? some systems work really well for some people and not so well for others. One system that I have, this is at the secondary level. So I've had a couple people ask me, and I am concerned that this could in fact impact participation. Are high school students getting jobs?
Wow. Yes.
And so teachers letting me know that students are telling them they can't do something at 11 because they have to go to work, or they can't do homework in the afternoon when they're supposed to be doing asynchronous because they're supposed to be at work. And is there a way that we can communicate that that shouldn't be happening?
I mean, we're going to, it's not the expectation that students work a couple of hours a day. The expectation is we get as close to normal school hours as possible. I understand that, when students were participating exclusively virtually, especially in the spring, there was probably more flexibility, although I don't know how many students were leaving their homes during that particular time. But it's the expectation that we are in school. I mean, this is school time, and we expect you to be there every single day. Of course, if there is an extenuating circumstance, we want to be made aware of it. But our expectation is the same, whether you are virtual or you're face-to-face. We need to see you every single day, and we need to see you for 6 hours or close to it. And if it's not face-to-face, we need to be providing the equivalent work that you would have had during non-distance learning.
Is there a way to communicate that?
Communicate that? Absolutely.
To families and also even to the public at large, because employers shouldn't be hiring students to work at noon either.
No. I will capture that, Dr. Baker.
Yeah.
I agree. That takes the whole community.
This is Christian chiming in. I absolutely agree with the whole conversation. But I think that we also need to be cognizant of the environment that would make a young high school student have to go out and get a job right now. So not all of our kids have the amenities that the kids that live in our households may have. So if my child went and got a job right now, it's solely for like extra pleasures, but someone else may have a parent who lost a job or a parent who's sick and it's affecting things. And that's not me saying that they should be working, but before we reach out to people and say, you don't hire our kids, we have to think about both sides of those things.
Well, they certainly shouldn't be hiring them during the synchronous hours. Yeah.
I absolutely understand. I'm just hoping that we look at all the angles of it. And I agree. What I'm saying is I agree, but I definitely want to be cognizant of the messaging that we share and understanding the struggles of why a student may need to do it. Because if they have to choose between being logged in synchronous hours and paying the bill or paying rent, some of our kids aren't making those decisions. And so just being cognizant about that and having conversations with students.
Yeah. And I mean, it's pre-COVID. You know this as well as I do, Ms. Grant and other board members. Pre-COVID, we have students working lots of hours during the week and going to school. And again, to your point, Ms. Grant, it's not, for luxury items or going to the movies or doing this or that. This is to really provide for their families. So we will be sensitive to that as well. Absolutely. Dr. Baker, are there any additional comments as it relates to this particular presentation or anything else?
No, that is the discussion. Anybody else have anything? All right.
No,
well,
thank you everyone for sharing this information today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Grant.
I think that if no one else has anything, thanks so much for the team to put together all of this data. It was it's quite a bit, and we appreciate it. And meeting is adjourned.
Have a great night, everybody.